I'm Rebecca Miller, 27 years old, standing in the doorway of my childhood home with tears streaming down my face. "No one wants you here," my brother Cameron spat, his words cutting deeper than any knife. The worst part? My mother Diane just nodded silently beside him. 5 years later, I'm worth millions, while they've lost everything. Now they're calling, texting, begging to be part of my life again. Before I continue my story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe if family drama hits close to home. Growing up in our middle-class neighborhood in Seattle, I never imagined my family would someday reject me completely. Our two-story colonial home on Maple Street was filled with laughter and love during my early years. My parents, Diane and Robert Miller, seemed to have the perfect marriage, and my relationship with my older brother Cameron was everything a little sister could hope for. My father Robert built his hardware store from nothing, working tirelessly to provide for us. Miller's Hardware became a neighborhood institution, known for fair prices and my father's encyclopedic knowledge of home repairs. Dad would come home smelling of sawdust and metal, his calloused hands always bringing some small treasure for Cameron and me. Our family traditions cemented my feeling of security. Sunday pancake breakfasts where Dad flipped perfect golden circles while Mom squeezed fresh orange juice. Summer camping trips to Lake Chelan where Cameron taught me to fish. Christmas mornings when we'd wake at dawn, racing downstairs in our matching pajamas while Mom recorded everything on her ancient camcorder. I excelled in school from an early age. Math and science came naturally to me, and my teachers often told my parents I had exceptional analytical skills. My creative side flourished too. I painted, wrote stories, and designed elaborate birthday cards that everyone kept for years. Mom would proudly display my report cards on the refrigerator and drive me to academic competitions on weekends. "You're going places, Becca," she would say, using her special nickname for me. "Just remember us little people when you're famous." Dad beamed with pride when I won the state science fair in 8th grade. He closed the store early that day, something he rarely did, to take us all out for a celebration dinner at the fancy Italian restaurant downtown. Things began to shift subtly when I turned 16. Cameron, by then 20, was struggling through his third year at the local community college. His grades were mediocre, and he'd changed majors 3 times. Meanwhile, I was taking advanced placement classes and starting to receive letters from prestigious universities. Cameron's jealousy emerged in small ways at first, dismissive comments about teachers' pets, and eye rolls when my achievements were mentioned at dinner. Mom would try to smooth things over, highlighting whatever small accomplishment Cameron had managed that week. "Your sister's just book smart," she'd tell him. "You have street smarts. That's more important in the real world anyway." I discovered my passion for computer programming during my junior year of high school. My computer science teacher, Mrs. Thompson, recognized my aptitude and connected me with a weekend coding workshop at the University of Washington. There, I developed my first simple app, a tool to help students organize study schedules. It wasn't revolutionary, but the process captivated me. The logical problem solving, the thrill of creating something functional from nothing but lines of code. I was hooked. When my acceptance letter from Stanford arrived with a substantial scholarship, my parents organized a backyard barbecue to celebrate. Even Cameron seemed genuinely happy for me that day, grilling my favorite lemon chicken and raising a toast to the family genius. Dad's eyes misted over as he hugged me tight. "Your mother and I couldn't be prouder," he whispered. "You're going to change the world someday, Becca." But tensions resurfaced as my departure date approached. Cameron had officially dropped out of college by then, telling our parents he wanted to get real-world experience instead. He started working at Dad's hardware store, learning the business from the ground up. Mom and Dad reacted differently to our diverging paths. Dad continued to encourage my academic pursuits while also supporting Cameron's decision to join the family business. Mom, however, became increasingly protective of Cameron, often remarking that college isn't for everyone, with a defensive edge to her voice. Despite the growing undercurrent of tension, I remained determined to succeed. I spent that summer before college creating detailed plans for my future, color-coded study schedules, research into internship opportunities, and lists of professors whose work aligned with my interests in digital design and programming. Our last truly happy family gathering was the weekend before I left for Stanford. We went to our favorite lakeside park, grilled hot dogs, and played our traditional family volleyball game. Dad presented me with a new laptop for school, and Mom gave me a handmade quilt for my dorm room. Even Cameron seemed to set aside his resentment, giving me a rare hug and a gift card to my favorite coffee shop. "Knock, am dead, sis," he said, with what seemed like genuine affection. "Just don't get too good for us regular folks." I didn't know then how prophetic his words would become, or how drastically our family dynamic would change in the coming months. As I packed my bags for Stanford, I was excited about my future, but never imagined it would come at the cost of my family. My freshman year at Stanford started brilliantly. I thrived in the challenging academic environment, made friends with like-minded students, and began building connections with professors impressed by my work ethic. My roommate Amanda became my closest friend, always ready with encouragement when coursework became overwhelming. Then came the call that changed everything. Mom's voice trembled as she told me Dad had suffered a massive heart attack while helping a customer load lumber at the store. He survived, but the doctors said he needed triple bypass surgery and months of recovery. Should I come home? I asked immediately, already mentally calculating how to arrange a leave of absence. "No," Mom said firmly. "Your father would never forgive us if we disrupted your education. Cameron will handle things here." I returned anyway for the week of Dad's surgery, using my midterm break to fly home. The atmosphere in our house had shifted dramatically. Medical equipment cluttered the living room where Dad would recover. Bills with red past due stamps sat in untidy piles on the kitchen counter. Mom looked exhausted, aging years in the months since I'd left. Cameron had taken over managing the hardware store, but was clearly struggling. Customer complaints had increased, inventory was mismanaged, and longtime employees were quitting. When I suggested some organizational systems that might help, Cameron exploded. "I don't need college advice from my baby sister. Some of us are dealing with real-world problems while you're off having fun in California." Mom immediately rushed to his defense. "Your brother is doing his best, Rebecca. He's here every day dealing with everything while you're away." The implication was clear. I had abandoned them when they needed me. I returned to Stanford with a heavy heart, but remained determined to succeed for all of us. I reasoned that finishing my education would ultimately put me in a better position to help my family financially. I sent home a portion of my scholarship money each month, though Cameron later told me they never used it because we're not charity cases. By summer break, I was eager to return home and help however I could. Dad was recovering slowly, still unable to work full-time. The hardware store was barely staying afloat under Cameron's management. Medical bills continued to mount, and our family's savings were depleted. The house felt different, tense and unwelcoming. Mom spent most of her time caring for Dad or helping Cameron with store paperwork. Their conversations would often stop abruptly when I entered a room. Cameron stayed out late most nights, coming home smelling of beer and making just enough noise to wake everyone. I tried to help around the house, cooking meals and handling household chores. Mom would inspect everything I did, often redoing tasks with sighs of exasperation. "This isn't how we do things, Rebecca," became her mantra, though we clearly meant her and Cameron. My big news that summer was an internship offer from a promising tech startup in San Francisco. The position was competitive, paid well, and would provide invaluable experience in app development, exactly the field I wanted to pursue. I announced it at dinner, expecting at least some congratulations. Instead, Cameron slammed his fork down. "Of course. Another excuse to abandon ship," he snapped. "Some of us don't have the luxury of running off to play with computers while the family business dies." "Cameron," Dad began weakly, but Mom cut him off. "Your father needs stability right now, Rebecca," she said. "Another disruption could affect his recovery. Surely your fancy education can wait one summer while your family needs you." The guilt was overwhelming. I spent nights crying in my childhood bedroom, torn between my dreams and family obligation. Dad found me packing one evening, my eyes swollen from tears. "Take the internship," he said quietly, sitting heavily on my bed. "Your brother and mother are scared right now, but that's not your burden to carry. You have a special gift, Rebecca. Don't let it go to waste because of our problems." His blessing gave me the courage to accept the position, despite Mom's cold silence and Cameron's bitter comments. The day I left, Mom barely hugged me goodbye. Cameron didn't even come home. The internship was transformative. My supervisor, Megan, became another mentor, recognizing my potential and giving me increasingly complex projects. By the end of summer, I had contributed significant code to the company's main product and received an open invitation to return. When I called home with this news, Mom answered with brief, distracted responses. Dad had developed complications and was back in the hospital. The hardware store had reduced its hours further. Mom ended the call quickly, saying Cameron needed the phone to call a supplier. My sophomore year brought more distance between us. Mom's calls became less frequent, often just brief updates about Dad's health. Cameron never called at all. I tried to maintain connection, sending care packages and calling weekly, but conversations were strained and short. Despite the family tension, I continued to excel academically. My professors noted my particular talent for user interface design combined with back-end functionality. I was developing a reputation as someone who could translate complex technical concepts into user-friendly experiences. By winter break, I had the seed of an idea for an app that would eventually change my life. A platform that used artificial intelligence to personalize financial education for young adults. The concept came from watching my own family's financial struggles and realizing how little most people understood about managing money effectively. I flew home for Christmas with mixed emotions, excited to share my ideas and see Dad, but dreading the tension with Mom and Cameron. Little did I know that this visit would completely sever my family ties and set me on an unexpected path to success. The Seattle rain was turning to sleet as my taxi pulled up to our family home 3 days before Christmas. The house looked neglected, gutters sagging, paint peeling, holiday decorations haphazardly hung. It was a physical manifestation of our family's decline. Mom answered the door with a quick, perfunctory hug. "You're later than we expected," was her greeting, though I'd texted my exact arrival time that morning. Cameron wasn't home. "Working late at the store," Mom explained, though I'd later learn he was actually at a bar downtown. Dad was asleep in a hospital bed that now dominated our living room, an oxygen tank hissing quietly beside him. I gasped when I saw him. He'd lost at least 30 pounds since summer, his face gaunt and gray beneath his silver-streaked beard. When he woke and saw me, though, his smile was genuine. "There's my girl," he whispered, voice raspy from medication. "Stanford treating you right?" We talked quietly while Mom prepared a sparse dinner. He asked about my classes, my friends, my ideas for the future. For a few precious moments, it felt like old times, Dad always my biggest cheerleader. After dinner, while helping Mom with dishes, I discovered a stack of overdue notices tucked beneath a cookbook. Second mortgage payments, medical bills, utility warnings, all marked with final notices. "Mom, I had no idea things were this bad," I said, my stomach knotting with worry. She snatched the papers away. "These are private family matters. We're handling it." "But I can help," I insisted. "My scholarship covers most expenses, and I've saved almost all my internship money." "I could. We don't need your charity," she snapped, then immediately softened her tone. "Your brother is taking care of everything. He's making sacrifices while you're off enjoying college." Cameron arrived home then, bringing a blast of cold air and the smell of whiskey. He barely acknowledged my presence with a grunt before checking on Dad. The next morning, I woke early and made breakfast, blueberry pancakes, Dad's favorite. Cameron emerged from his room around 11, glowering at the domestic scene of Dad and me playing cards at the kitchen table. "Playing house for the holidays?" he muttered, pouring coffee. I ignored the jab and tried to engage him. "I'd love to see the store today. Maybe I could help with the inventory system you mentioned was giving you trouble." His laugh was sharp and humorless.
Right.
The college genius swoops in to save the day. Later that afternoon, I found Mom alone and tried again to discuss their financial situation. I'd worked out a plan where I could transfer some of my savings without impacting my education. Mom, please let me help. I've calculated what I can contribute monthly without. Stop, she interrupted, eyes flashing. Do you think throwing money at us makes up for abandoning your family? Cameron has given up everything to keep this family afloat. Everything. While you're off living your California dream, posting happy photos with your new friends, he's working himself to death trying to save your father's legacy. That's not fair. I protested, tears welling. I'm trying to build a future that can help all of us. Dad always said my education was an investment in. Your father isn't thinking clearly anymore, she cut me off coldly. The medication affects his judgment. That night was Christmas Eve. I'd bought thoughtful gifts despite my student budget. A cashmere scarf for Mom, a high-quality tool set for Cameron, and a rare first edition of Dad's favorite mystery novel. I placed them under the sparse tree, hoping they might thaw the ice between us. Dad's condition worsened overnight. He developed a fever, and his breathing became more labored. The visiting nurse advised us to monitor him closely, but said hospitalization wasn't necessary yet. The stress in the house reached a breaking point. While preparing a light dinner in the kitchen, I overheard Cameron and Mom discussing the impending second mortgage payment. We should ask her, Mom said quietly. She mentioned having savings.
No, Cameron replied firmly.
She'll just hold it over us forever. Miss Perfect solving all our problems. I couldn't stay silent anymore. I walked into the living room where they sat huddled over bank statements. I want to help, I said firmly. Dad needs better care, and you're drowning in debt. I have almost $15,000 saved.
Take it.
No strings attached. The silence was deafening. Cameron's face darkened as he slowly stood up. You think you can just buy your way back into this family? He said, voice dangerously quiet. Show up twice a year, wave your Stanford scholarship and tech internship in our faces, then play the hero with your pocket change. That's not what No one wants you here, he suddenly shouted, making Mom flinch beside him. You abandoned us when we needed you most. You chose your precious career over family. Now you want to swoop in with your charity and expect gratitude. I looked to Mom, waiting for her to defend me, to remind Cameron that Dad had insisted I continue my education. Instead, she nodded silently, her eyes fixed on the floor. The room spun around me. Mom, I whispered, my voice breaking. Maybe it would be better if you went back early, she said softly, still not meeting my eyes. Your presence is complicating things for your brother and upsetting your father. I glanced toward Dad's hospital bed. He appeared to be sleeping, though I later wondered if he was simply avoiding the confrontation, too weak to defend me. I see, I managed to say, though my throat felt like it was closing. I'll pack my things. I climbed the stairs in a daze, tears flowing freely now. The bedroom that had once been my sanctuary felt foreign. Mom had converted half of it to storage, boxes of Cameron's old things piled on my bed. I grabbed my suitcase and stuffed in what I could, leaving behind childhood mementos I'd never see again. Before leaving, I crept into the living room to say goodbye to Dad. His eyes fluttered open as I approached. They're making me leave, I whispered, clutching his frail hand. Go, he said weakly. Build your life. Don't look back for us. I tried to find Mom, but Cameron blocked my path to the kitchen. She doesn't want to see you. Just go. I stepped out into the snowy Christmas Eve night with nowhere to go. Hotels were booked solid for the holiday. In desperation, I called Amanda, my college roommate, who lived across town. Her family welcomed me without questions, setting up their guest room and including me in their Christmas dinner the next day. 3 days later, Mom called. Dad's condition had deteriorated rapidly. He was in the hospital and asking for me. Despite everything, I rushed to his side. He looked tiny in the hospital bed, monitors beeping softly around him. Cameron and Mom were nowhere to be seen, getting coffee, a nurse explained. Dad's eyes brightened when he saw me. He patted the bed weakly, and I sat beside him. Listen carefully, he said, his voice barely audible. You have a gift, Rebecca. A brilliant mind. Promise me you won't waste it. I promise, I whispered, tears falling. They're scared, he continued. Fear makes people cruel. Don't let their fear become your burden. He squeezed my hand with surprising strength. Promise me you'll pursue your dreams, no matter what. I promise, I repeated. Good girl, he smiled faintly. I've always been so proud of you. Those were the last words my father ever said to me. He died 2 days later while I was back at Amanda's house. Cameron called to inform me in a flat, emotionless voice. When I asked about funeral arrangements, he said they were handling it as a family. I attended my father's funeral like an unwelcome stranger. Mom and Cameron stood together receiving condolences, while I sat in the back row. My father's sister, Aunt Judith, was the only one who acknowledged me with a hug and whispered, "This isn't right, what they're doing to you." After the service, I approached Mom to ask if I could have one of Dad's books as a memento. She looked through me as if I were invisible, turning away to accept a neighbor's embrace. That was the moment I truly understood I was alone in the world. The family I'd loved was gone. As I walked away from the cemetery, I made a decision. I would honor my promise to Dad. I would build my future without looking back. Returning to Stamford after my father's funeral, I found myself in a dark place. Grief over Dad's death combined with the shock of family rejection left me struggling to function. I'd sit in lectures, hearing nothing but the echo of Cameron's words. No one wants you here. Nights were spent staring at the ceiling, replaying Mom's silent nod of agreement. Amanda became my lifeline during those bleak months. She'd bring me food when I forgot to eat, drag me outside for brief walks when I'd spent too long hunched over my laptop, and simply sit with me during the worst moments of despair. You're not alone, she'd remind me. You have me. You have purpose. And you have that brilliant brain of yours. Gradually, I found that work was my most effective coping mechanism. Coding didn't judge me or reject me. Problems had solutions. Algorithms either worked or they didn't. The clarity was comforting. Professor Jennifer Wright noticed my withdrawal in her advanced programming class and asked me to stay after one day. Instead of the expected academic warning, she surprised me by asking about my app idea. Your concept for financial education is innovative, she said. Have you considered applying to the university's startup incubator program? I hadn't. Between grief and trying to stay afloat academically, I'd set aside my personal projects. Professor Wright's interest rekindled something in me, a small spark of the passion I'd felt before everything fell apart. The application deadline is Friday, she continued, sliding a brochure across her desk. I'd be happy to write your recommendation letter. That night, for the first time in months, I worked until sunrise, not from insomnia, but from genuine excitement. I refined my app concept, created wireframes, and drafted a business plan. The application took shape, fueled by a new determination. To support myself completely, I took on 3 jobs: morning shifts at a campus coffee shop, afternoon tutoring hours, and weekend work as a junior coder for a local business. Between classes, work, and developing my app, I barely had time to breathe, let alone dwell on my family situation. 3 months after the funeral, on Mom's birthday, I made a final attempt at reconciliation. I sent flowers and a card with my new phone number, hoping time might have softened her stance. The flowers were returned. The card came back marked, "Returned to sender," in Cameron's handwriting. A week later, I received a text from an unknown number, Cameron informing me they were selling the family home to cover remaining medical debts and the failing store. His message ended with, "Hope you're happy at Stamford while we lose everything. This is on you." I blocked the number without responding. That night, I deleted all my social media accounts and changed my email address. If they wanted to reach me now, they would have to make a real effort. Professor Wright became the mentor I desperately needed. She connected me with alumni in the tech industry, reviewed my code, and pushed me to think bigger. Your app isn't just about financial literacy, she said. It's about democratizing financial empowerment. That's a vision worth fighting for. Despite my personal struggles, I graduated with honors. Amanda's family attended the ceremony, cheering loudly when I crossed the stage. The empty seats I'd reserved for Mom and Cameron remained painfully visible. The real turning point came when my application to Silicon Valley's most prestigious tech accelerator program was accepted. With a small stipend and shared housing in San Francisco, I finally had the runway to fully develop my app. Moving to San Francisco marked the beginning of my true independence. My apartment was tiny, barely more than a converted closet with a twin bed and desk, but it was mine. No one could tell me I wasn't wanted there. The accelerator program was intense and exhilarating. 12-hour days surrounded by ambitious founders and industry mentors pushed me beyond what I thought possible. My app evolved from a simple financial education tool to a comprehensive platform using artificial intelligence to create personalized financial roadmaps for users based on their specific situations and goals. I named it Pathfinder Financial, with the tagline, "Everyone deserves a map to their future." Networking events were initially torture for my introverted nature, but I forced myself to attend every one. At a demo day 3 months into the program, I gave my pitch to a room full of investors. My hands shook as I demonstrated the app's capabilities, but my voice stayed steady. I spoke about how financial literacy could break cycles of poverty and debt, knowledge I'd gained from watching my own family's struggles. After my presentation, Lisa Kwan, a partner at a major venture capital firm, approached me. "Your passion is evident," she said, handing me her card. "But more importantly, your solution is elegant. Let's talk next week." That meeting led to my first investment round, $2 million to fully develop Pathfinder and bring it to market. The validation was overwhelming. For the first time since my father's death, I felt like I might actually fulfill my promise to him. Building my team was the next challenge. I needed people who shared my vision and complemented my skills. Marcus, a UX designer I'd met in the accelerator program, became my first hire. Deepa joined next, bringing machine learning expertise that elevated our AI capabilities. Jamal rounded out our core team with his background in financial compliance and regulations. We worked out of a converted warehouse in Oakland, sleeping on office couches during crunch periods and celebrating small victories with cheap champagne. These people became my new family. One built on mutual respect and shared purpose rather than obligation. As the company grew, I began working with a therapist to process my family trauma. Dr. Simmons helped me understand that my mother's behavior stemmed from her own fears and Cameron's from his deep-seated insecurities. Understanding didn't excuse their actions, but it helped me begin to release the weight of rejection I'd carried. You can acknowledge their pain without taking responsibility for it, Dr. Simmons said in one pivotal session. Their choices are not your burden. The first version of Pathfinder launched 18 months after that initial investment. User growth exceeded all projections, with college students and young professionals particularly responsive to our approach. When Apple featured us as App of the Week, our download numbers exploded. With success came financial security I'd never imagined. I purchased my first real apartment, a one-bedroom with big windows and no roommates. The day I moved in, I stood in the empty living room and wept. Not from sadness, but from the realization that I'd created this security for myself despite everything. That night, I wrote a letter to my father that I would never send. I told him about the business, my new friends, my tiny but perfect apartment. I told him I was keeping my promise. Then I burned the letter and scattered the ashes from my new balcony, finally letting go of the need for family approval I'd carried for so long. 3 years after being told no one wanted me, Pathfinder Financial had transformed from a promising startup into a dominant force in financial technology. Our company valuation hit $50 million after our Series B funding round, with user numbers surpassing 2 million active accounts. The press attention began with industry publications, but quickly expanded to mainstream media. TechCrunch ran a feature calling our AI-driven approach revolutionary. The Wall Street Journal highlighted how we were disrupting traditional financial advisory services. Then came the Forbes 30 Under 30 recognition that would unexpectedly reopen old wounds. The Forbes profile included my background, Stanford education, innovative coding approach, and vision for financial empowerment. The photographer captured me standing in our new headquarters, a gleaming office in downtown San Francisco, where 150 employees now worked. The article mentioned my father's death as a catalyst for my interest in financial planning, but made no reference to my estrangement from the rest of my family. My personal life had stabilized along with my professional success. The tiny apartment had been traded for a spacious loft with views of the bay. I developed genuine friendships beyond my work circle. I'd even started dating occasionally, though cautiously. Trust didn't come easily after my family's betrayal. Perhaps most meaningful to me was the foundation I'd established to provide scholarships for students from financially struggling families. The Rebecca Miller Future Fund supported 10 students annually with full-ride scholarships to top universities, with a stipulation that recipients would mentor the next generation of scholars. Success isn't just about making money, I explained during a CNBC interview about the foundation. It's about creating opportunity ladders for others to climb. The email from Cameron arrived 3 days after the Forbes article was published. Seeing his name in my inbox sent a physical shock through my system, a cold rush followed by nausea. For several minutes, I simply stared at the screen, cursor hovering over the delete button. Curiosity won. The message began with effusive congratulations, as though we were ordinary siblings who'd simply lost touch. He expressed pride in my accomplishments and mentioned casually that things have been tough here in Seattle. The email ended with a suggestion that we reconnect as family should.
No apology.
No acknowledgement of his cruel rejection. No mention of his parting words that had haunted me for years. I closed my laptop without responding and called Dr. Simmons, who had become a trusted advisor. "What do you want to do?" she asked after I'd read her the email. "Part of me wants to ignore it completely," I admitted. Another part wants to respond with screenshots of his text blaming me for their financial problems. "Both are valid reactions," she said. "The question is, which response serves your well-being now?" I decided not to respond immediately. Instead, I hired a private investigator to discreetly look into my family's current situation. The information he provided confirmed what Cameron had implied. Things were indeed tough. The family home had been sold years ago to cover debts. The hardware store had closed permanently. Cameron was working as a sales associate at a big-box home improvement store, making barely above minimum wage. Most concerning, Mom had been diagnosed with breast cancer and was receiving inadequate treatment due to limited insurance coverage. The investigators' photos showed them living in a small, rundown apartment in a part of Seattle I barely recognized. Mom looked thin and gray, much older than her 58 years. Despite everything, I couldn't ignore their suffering. Working through my attorney, I anonymously established a medical fund for Mom's treatments and arranged for her to see specialists at a top oncology center. The money was presented as a grant from a foundation supporting cancer patients. They would never know it came from me. Meanwhile, Cameron's messages continued with increasing frequency and desperation. He reminisced about our childhood, as if the rejection had never happened. He mentioned Mom's illness briefly, followed quickly by updates about his promising business opportunities that just needed a little capital investment. When I continued not to respond, his approach shifted. He began commenting publicly on news articles about me, writing things like, "So proud of my little sister. Always knew she'd make it big. Supported her dream from day one." The final straw came when he created a social media post claiming he had sacrificed my own education to support my sister's early career and was now hoping she remembers those who helped her along the way. He included a childhood photo of us that I barely remembered. The post went viral within my industry circles. Then, unexpectedly, 3 of my Stanford classmates who knew the truth commented publicly. Amanda was first, writing a scathing rebuttal detailing how I'd shown up at her door on Christmas Eve after being thrown out of my family home. 2 others shared similar accounts of how I'd worked multiple jobs while excelling academically, with no family support. Cameron quickly deleted the post, but the damage to his narrative was done. The public exposure of his lies should have felt vindicating, but instead left me feeling hollow. What was the point of this conflict continuing? What closure was I seeking? That evening, my assistant notified me of a voicemail from an unknown Seattle number. It was Mom. The first time I'd heard her voice in 5 years. Unlike Cameron's messages, hers contained no false cheer or manipulation. She was crying. "Rebecca, it's Mom," she began, her voice thin and unfamiliar. "I don't expect you to call back. The doctors say the new treatment is working. I don't know how we qualified for this program, but I wanted to thank you if you had anything to do with it. And to say,
I'm sorry.
so sorry for everything." The message ended there. No request for money.
No excuses.
Just a simple acknowledgement and gratitude. It wasn't enough to erase years of pain, but it was the first crack in the wall between us. I saved the message, but didn't return the call. Not yet. I needed time to process my feelings and decide what kind of relationship, if any, I wanted with what remained of my family. As Pathfinder continued its meteoric rise, I found myself at a crossroads. The company was planning to open regional offices, with Seattle on the short list. Would I finally face my past directly? And if so, what would I say to the people who had cast me out when I needed them most? The decision to open Pathfinder's Northwest Regional Office in Seattle wasn't just a business move. It was a personal reckoning I could no longer avoid. After 5 years of building walls between myself and my past, I was finally strong enough to face it directly. I arrived in Seattle on a clear autumn day, the familiar scent of salt water and coffee in the air. The city had changed, and so had I. No longer the heartbroken college student fleeing rejection. I stepped off the private jet as the CEO of a company valued at over $100 million. Before addressing the family situation, I spent 3 days in back-to-back meetings securing our new office space and interviewing potential staff. The routine of business provided a comfortable buffer, postponing the confrontation I both dreaded and needed. On the 4th evening, I had my assistant arrange a meeting at Canlis, one of Seattle's most exclusive restaurants. I reserved a private dining room with sweeping views of Lake Union. Neutral territory where I could maintain my composure and control the interaction. When Cameron and Mom arrived, the maitre d' escorted them to our table. Their physical transformation was shocking despite the investigators' photos. Mom looked frail, her cancer treatments evident in her thin frame and headscarf. Cameron had aged poorly, his once athletic build now soft, with deep lines etching his face. Their clothes were clean but worn, out of place in the elegant setting. "Rebecca," Mom whispered, taking a half-step toward me before stopping herself, uncertain of her welcome. I didn't rise for an embrace, but gestured to the chairs across from me. "Thank you for coming. Please sit down." Cameron recovered quickly, smoothing his expression into a practiced smile. "This place is amazing, sis. You've done really well for yourself." He glanced around at the luxurious surroundings. The Forbes article didn't do justice. The waiter appeared with water and menus. I ordered wine for the table, an expensive Cabernet that cost more than Cameron likely made in a day. The power dynamic wasn't subtle, and I didn't intend it to be. For the first 20 minutes, we engaged in the most painful small talk imaginable. Cameron chatted about Seattle's changing neighborhoods. Mom quietly asked about my foundation work, which she'd read about online. I responded with polite but brief answers, waiting for them to address the elephant in the room. They didn't. Instead, Cameron steered the conversation toward his latest business venture, a home services app connecting homeowners with contractors. The irony wasn't lost on me. He was essentially describing a digital version of what our father's hardware store had provided through personal relationships. "It's got amazing potential," he said, becoming animated for the first time. "I've got the industry knowledge and connections from working at the store all those years. Just need some development expertise and capital to get it off the ground." Mom stared at her barely touched salmon. Cameron leaned forward, lowering his voice conspiratorially. "I'm thinking $500,000 would get us launched properly. With your connections, We could probably line up series of funding within 6 months. It would be a real family business just like Dad always wanted. There it was, the real purpose of this reunion. Not reconciliation, not genuine remorse, but a business pitch wrapped in family manipulation. I set down my wine glass carefully. Before we discuss any business opportunities, I think we need to address what happened 5 years ago. Cameron's expression flickered before settling into confusion. Ancient history, Becca. Families have disagreements. We've all moved past that, right? Have we? I asked quietly. You told me no one wanted me in our family. Mom nodded in agreement. You blamed me for Dad's death and your financial problems. You returned my birthday card to Mom marked, "Return to sender." That doesn't feel like a simple disagreement to me. Mom's eyes filled with tears. Cameron shifted uncomfortably. We were under tremendous pressure, he said defensively. Dad was dying, the business was failing, bills were piling up. You were off at Stanford with your scholarship and internships while we were losing everything. I offered to help. I reminded him, my voice steady despite the emotion building inside me. I offer my savings. You threw it back in my face. We were proud, Cameron countered. We didn't want charity. But now you want $500,000 for your business idea. Cameron flushed. That's different. That's an investment. Is it? I looked directly at Mom, who hadn't spoken. Mom, is that how you see this too? Not as charity, but as an investment opportunity. She finally raised her eyes to meet mine. I don't care about any business or money, she said softly. I just wanted to see you before. She didn't finish the sentence, but her meaning was clear. Before her cancer potentially took her life. Then why didn't you call me yourself? I asked. Why let Cameron orchestrate this reunion with a business pitch? I was ashamed, she admitted, her voice barely audible. What we did to you was unforgivable. I didn't think you'd want to hear from me directly. You're right, I said plainly. What you did was unforgivable. I was 20 years old, grieving Dad just like you were. I needed my family, and you chose to cast me out. Cameron started to interrupt, but I held up my hand. Let me finish. For 5 years, I've carried your words with me. No one wants you here. Do you know what that does to a person? To believe they're unwanted by the people who are supposed to love them unconditionally. Mom was openly crying now. Cameron stared at the tablecloth. I built my company while working 3 jobs and finishing college alone. I cried myself to sleep for months. I had panic attacks before business meetings, hearing your voice telling me I wasn't wanted. I spent thousands of dollars on therapy trying to understand why my family would reject me during the worst moment of my life. My voice remained calm, but I could feel tears threatening. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction. Now you're here because you need something from me, not because you've genuinely reckoned with what you did. Cameron finally looked up, anger flashing in his eyes. You always were self-righteous. You think you're the only one who suffered? We lost everything. The house, the store, Dad's legacy. While you were becoming a tech millionaire, we were filing for bankruptcy. And you think that was my fault? I asked incredulously. You abandoned us when we needed help running the store, he shouted, drawing looks from nearby diners despite our private room. Mom placed a restraining hand on his arm. Cameron, stop. This isn't Rebecca's fault. It never was. She turned to me, her expression raw with remorse. We were wrong. I was wrong. I let my fear and grief cloud my judgment. I failed you as a mother, and I've regretted it every day since. Her admission hung in the air between us. For a moment, no one spoke. Did you know, I finally said, my voice softer now, that I've been paying for your cancer treatments? The foundation that approved your case at Seattle Cancer Care Alliance? That's my foundation. Mom's hand flew to her mouth. Cameron looked stunned. I've known about your situation for months. I continued. When Cameron first contacted me, I hired someone to look into your circumstances. When I learned about your diagnosis, I couldn't just do nothing, despite everything. Why didn't you tell us? Cameron asked. Would you have accepted help if you knew it came from me? The sister you said no one wanted. He had no answer for that. I don't hate either of you, I said after a long pause. I'm not even angry anymore. But I don't trust you. And I won't invest in a business with someone who doesn't acknowledge the harm they've caused. Cameron started to protest, but Mom silenced him with a look. What do you want from us, Rebecca? She asked quietly. Tell us how to make this right. It was the first honest question of the evening. I want acknowledgement of what happened. Not excuses, not justifications. I want to know you understand the impact of your actions. I turned to Cameron. I won't be investing in your business idea, but I am expanding in Seattle and will need local staff. If you're serious about rebuilding a relationship, I can offer you a legitimate position, entry level, no special treatment. You'll work your way up like everyone else. He looked like he might argue, then nodded slowly. And Mom, I continued, I'll continue covering your medical expenses. I've purchased a small house near a new office. You can live there if you wish. It's more comfortable than your apartment and closer to your treatment center. Why would you do this after everything? She asked, tears streaming down her face. Because Dad asked me to be better than my pain, I said simply. But I have conditions. Both of you will attend therapy individually and with me. We'll address what happened honestly, without excuses. And Cameron, you'll take down every social media post claiming you supported my career. That's it? Cameron asked, suspicious of the relatively straightforward terms. No, I replied. The most important condition is this. We proceed at my pace. I'm not promising forgiveness or a picture-perfect family reunion. I'm offering a path forward if you both want it badly enough to do the work. Mom reached across the table, her hand stopping inches from mine. I want it, she said. Whatever it takes. Cameron nodded his agreement, though I could see the struggle behind his eyes. Pride wrestling with necessity. I signaled for the check. Our expensive dinner barely touched. As we stood to leave, I felt lighter somehow. Not healed, not whole, but no longer defined by their rejection. For the first time in 5 years, I was the one setting the terms of our relationship. I'll have my assistant contact you with details tomorrow, I said as we parted at the restaurant entrance. Mom hesitated, then asked timidly, would it be too much to ask for a hug? I considered her request, searching my feelings honestly. Not today, I said gently, but maybe someday soon. As their taxi pulled away, I stood alone in the cool Seattle evening, breathing deeply. The confrontation I'd dreaded for years was over. I hadn't crumbled. I hadn't compromised my boundaries. I had faced my past with dignity and strength. Dad would have been proud. 6 months after our confrontation at Canlis, I sat in Dr. Lorraine Patterson's office for our 4th family therapy session. The sleek downtown Seattle practice was a far cry from the cramped community mental health clinic where our first awkward session had taken place. Cameron sat stiffly on one end of the couch, Mom in the middle, me in the armchair opposite. The physical distance between Cameron and me was deliberate and symbolic. We had made progress, but trust was still a fragile, growing thing. Rebecca, Dr. Patterson began, would you share your observations about the changes you've seen since our work began? I considered the question carefully. There's been progress, I acknowledged. Cameron has been consistent in his position at the company. I didn't add that his supervisor had reported his initial resentment at starting in the customer support department or his complaints about working for my little sister. Those attitudes had gradually shifted as he discovered his natural talent for understanding user problems. And your relationship with Diane? Dr. Patterson prompted, using Mom's first name as we'd established in these sessions. Better, I said simply. The house arrangement is working. I had maintained professional distance by having my property manager handle all details of Mom's living situation, but we'd established a weekly dinner routine, just the two of us, no Cameron, no business talk. Mom smiled tentatively. Her health had improved dramatically with proper treatment. The hollow look had left her eyes, and her hair was growing back, short silver curls that somehow suited her better than the dyed brown she'd maintained throughout my childhood. I've been keeping the journal you suggested, Mom offered, writing down memories of Rebecca's childhood that I never properly acknowledged or celebrated. It's been revealing to see how often I sidelined her achievements to protect Cameron's feelings. Cameron shifted uncomfortably, but didn't interrupt. This was progress too. His first instinct had always been defensive deflection. Cameron? Dr. Patterson turned to my brother. Your observations? He cleared his throat. The entry-level position was harder than I expected, he admitted. But it's been good to earn something on my own merit. And the health insurance covering Mom's treatments. He paused, emotion briefly overtaking him. I couldn't have provided that for her. I need to acknowledge that. What remained unspoken but understood was that his business idea had been more fantasy than viable plan, a desperate attempt to reclaim his self-image as the family provider. Outside these therapy sessions, our lives had developed new rhythms. Pathfinder's Seattle office had grown to 30 employees, with Cameron slowly earning the respect of his colleagues through genuine effort rather than family connection. Mom had joined a cancer survivor support group and volunteered weekly at a local community garden, small steps toward building an identity beyond her illness and family role. My own life had evolved as well. The company continued to thrive, with user numbers exceeding 5 million and a new partnership with a major national bank. I split my time between San Francisco and Seattle, maintaining the boundaries I needed while gradually reconnecting with the city of my childhood. 3 months after Cameron started working at Pathfinder, I had purchased a comfortable 3-bedroom home for Mom in a quiet Seattle neighborhood near our office. The property featured a small but well-kept garden, something she'd always wanted but never had in our family's modest house. Though I legally owned the property, I made it clear it was hers to make a home, not a temporary arrangement contingent on my approval. The first dinner I attended there had been awkward, Cameron hovering anxiously, Mom fussing over every detail of the meal. But as monthly family dinners became routine, the tension gradually eased. We weren't the family we had been before Dad's death, but we were becoming something new. More honest, with clearer boundaries. What I've observed, Dr. Patterson said, bringing my attention back to the therapy session, is that all 3 of you are learning to relate as adults rather than through your old family patterns. Rebecca, you're setting healthy boundaries while allowing for connection. Diane, you're taking responsibility for past behaviors without self-punishment. And Cameron, you're beginning to build an identity separate from your role as the son who stayed. She turned a page in her notebook. Today, I'd like to discuss something we've touched on but not fully explored, your father's legacy in this family system. The mention of Dad created a palpable shift in the room. Mom straightened, Cameron looked down, and I felt the familiar tightness in my chest. Robert was the peacekeeper, Mom said softly. He balanced us. When he got sick, everything fell apart. He always believed in you, Cameron said suddenly, looking directly at me. Even when I was jealous and Mom was scared, he never wavered in his support for your dreams. I resented that for years. His admission hung in the air between us. Do you still resent it? I asked, my voice steady despite the emotion building inside. Cameron considered the question with a thoughtfulness that would have been impossible 6 months earlier. No, he finally said. I resented the wrong thing. It wasn't Dad's fault for believing in you. It wasn't your fault for having gifts that I don't have. I should have resented the unfair expectations I put on myself. It wasn't a complete revelation or a dramatic breakthrough, but it was honest, perhaps the first truly honest thing my brother had said to me in years. The session continued with difficult but necessary conversations about Dad's legacy, about grief that had gone unexpressed, about the different ways we had each tried to honor or escape his memory. Afterward, as we stood on the sidewalk outside the office building, Mom hesitantly asked if I would join them for dinner that weekend. I found Dad's old recipe for Sunday pot roast, she explained. I thought maybe I'd like that, I said, surprising myself with how much I meant it. As the months passed, our healing continued, imperfect, nonlinear, but real. Cameron eventually earned a promotion to team lead in the customer experience department, his natural charm and hardware store background proving valuable in understanding small business owners using our platform. Mom's cancer went into remission. She joined a book club, made new friends, and started painting, a hobby she'd abandoned in her 20s. On her 60th birthday, I arranged a small gallery showing of her work, inviting her new friends and a few art dealers I knew through business connections. The pride in her eyes when someone purchased one of her landscapes reminded me of how she'd once looked at my childhood achievements. My own life expanded beyond work and family reconciliation. I began dating James, a kind and thoughtful architect I met through a business associate. Unlike previous relationships I'd rushed or sabotaged, I approached this one with the emotional tools therapy had provided, communicating clearly, setting boundaries, allowing vulnerability without fear of abandonment. The true test of our family's progress came during the winter holidays, 1 year after our confrontation at Canlis. I hosted Christmas dinner at my Seattle apartment, a deliberate reclaiming of the holiday that had marked our deepest fracture. Cameron arrived with his new girlfriend, Shannon, a kindergarten teacher who seemed genuinely fond of him and completely unimpressed by his connection to me or Pathfinder. Mom brought her paintings as gifts, each thoughtfully chosen to reflect our personalities. James helped me cook, his steady presence a reminder of how far I'd come in building relationships based on mutual respect rather than obligation. As we gathered around the table, Mom raised her glass. "To family," she said simply. "The one we lost, the one we're rebuilding, and the new members we welcome." She nodded toward James and Shannon. "To family," we echoed. Later that evening, as James and Shannon washed dishes, ignoring my protests about guests cleaning, Cameron approached me on the balcony where I'd stepped out for a moment alone. "I have something for you," he said, handing me a small, wrapped package. "It's not expensive, but I thought you should have it." Inside was Dad's pocket watch, the one he'd carried every day at the hardware store. The gold was worn thin in places, the face slightly scratched, but it still ticked steadily. "Mom gave it to me after the funeral," Cameron explained. "But it should be yours. Dad would want you to have it." I ran my thumb over the initials engraved on the back. R.M. Robert Miller. My father, who had believed in me when no one else did. "Thank you," I whispered, unable to say more. Cameron nodded, understanding in his eyes that wouldn't have been there a year ago. "I'm sorry, Rebecca. For everything. Not because you're successful now or because you're helping us, but because what we did was wrong. You didn't deserve any of it." It wasn't a perfect apology, but it was sincere. I could see it in his eyes, hear it in his voice. And somehow that was enough. "I know," I said simply. We stood in comfortable silence, watching the Seattle skyline twinkle with holiday lights. The path forward wasn't perfect or certain, but it was real. We were no longer defined by that terrible Christmas Eve rejection, but by the harder, more meaningful work of rebuilding with truth and boundaries. As we returned inside to rejoin the others, I realized the most important lesson of my journey. True success wasn't measured by the company valuation, the press coverage, or even proving my family wrong. It was found in honoring my father's belief in me by becoming someone who could face rejection, build something meaningful, and still find the courage to offer second chances, on my own terms. The wealth I'd accumulated gave me options, but the real richness was in reclaiming my power to define family on my terms. No one could ever again tell me I wasn't wanted. I had built a life where I was not only wanted but valued, respected, and loved by others and, most importantly, by myself. If you've ever faced rejection from those who should have loved you unconditionally, I hope my story reminds you that their limitations don't define your worth. Have you experienced family rejection that later turned to acceptance when your circumstances changed? Share your stories in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video if it resonated with you, subscribe for more real-life stories of resilience, and share with someone who might need to hear that rejection isn't the end of their story. It might just be the beginning of something better. Thank you for listening, and remember, your worth isn't determined by who wants you in their life, but by how bravely you live yours.